It's so interesting that I'll show no one built building this time and huge scale projects. This is, I think, it's a good contrast for today. This is our architectural bureau in Moscow, founded almost 15 or maybe 17 years ago. And my idea is to show how student research helping us and our teaching helping us to find, I wouldn't say new ideas, but important ideas. And for me, the good example is Venturi and Brown learning from Las Vegas when they decided to do the research, introducing the stripe to the world. Las Vegas, and it changed completely the architecture later. It was just the student work originally from the beginning. In 2011, it's a coincidence from one side, from another side not, because it helps us now to be selected even for international competitions. We did for the diploma work this Moscow inventory research when we were researching the old Moscow, because the old Moscow in reality is the hole in the middle, and the idea was to cut the old Moscow and to see like the structure of the city, and we did an inventory of these quarters, and the biggest one is 300 hectares, the biggest one. The smallest one you can see is the size of Barcelona and Madrid and Milan. The smallest one. The biggest one is 300 hectares. This is the structure. It's not a quartal, of course, it's the microrayon. Then we did that structure with the density of roads, and we have in that old city 28% and 14% and 6% on the periphery. And first, we were the first that counted that, and then it starts to be clear for Moscow Transportation Department that something goes wrong with the transportation, because traffic is evident, but the reason is that the density of roads. Also, we did a little of calculation of what is the center in the gardening. This center is only 5% of the territory, even less. And it's not historical city anymore because they built, there was 10,000 buildings in the center before the revolution. Now we have these old buildings, only 5,000, the half. During the Soviet era, 1,000 building built in the center, and during last 12 years or 20 years, which is the post-Soviet period, also 1,000. And it means that, and you can see the difference in the structure, because in the middle you can see the Stalinist structure. They created streets and spaces and gardening, and you can see no structure in the post-Soviet. It's it's like a dotted. And then we understand that the only value we have is the structure of the streets, and the idea is to do the souvenir from that and to sell this. Also, we did an inventory of abandoned territories, and this is also interesting because we have numerous of abandoned territories in Moscow, and Moscow is still sprawling. It's a huge agglomeration. And then we decided to finally that the most interesting thing is the periphery of Moscow. We finished that research with the idea of cutting not the gardening, cutting the third ring. This is the size of the periphery in Paris. Exactly the same. It's the old city, Stalinist city. We cut everything which is structured and leave everything which looks not so well structured, microrayons, abandoned things, a lot of nature. And later, having this idea of cutting the center, we apply for the competition for the research for Moscow Urban Forum 2013 with the title Archaeology of the Periphery. And this inventory helps us to be chosen as, be paid even And we had almost 4.5 months to do the work. And the work was to research the periphery, and I'll show you shortly what is the outcome from that. First, we choose 35 cities around the world and did the index, like FAR, floor area ratio. We did periphery area ratio index. It's simple. There is a center, and we had agents in all of those cities, and they send us articles, all of them, and they help us to check our data, because usually you cannot research something. I don't know how to research São Paulo, but we had a couple of agents there, and one of them write text, others were helping, students were helping to collect the data. Then we understand that America is the leader, of course, because Los Angeles, the periphery area ratio is 9 or almost 10,000. Seoul is 4. There is no periphery in Seoul. Then we did this comparison of Moscow. Of course, it's about urbanization, and this area growth during the 20th century, and we can see that their population, I'm sorry that everything is not maybe well seen, but you can, if someone is interested, you can download this from the site of Moscow Urban Forum. It's open. It's not like a property. And Moscow is somewhere between Lagos and Cairo in terms of population growth, but it's still on. And the general tendency is that 2 billion people will be living in slums, maybe most in the peripheries. And maybe there is a time to shift from planned cities to spontaneous cities, because we cannot control these megapolises. And the idea was just to understand what's wrong with these peripheries. It's about riots in Paris. We have a lot of different peripheries in the world. We have also inventory in that research. Sometimes it looks nice. And if we are talking about the centers, this is Tokyo, and of course, we can say that now there is a cult of the center, because everybody dreaming about these qualities of the centers, but people, as an example, in Moscow, living on the periphery. 90% of people living on the periphery, no one living in the center. But all of the values are about streets, pedestrianization, and we have 10 more pedestrian streets now in the center of Moscow. And all of the investments counted are like $5 billion a year for this pedestrianization in Moscow. Nothing on the periphery. This is Moscow. This is like a Moscow periphery. You can see even small buildings there and microrayons. And this is the typical periphery of Moscow. And this is the research. This is the methodology. We did there's like a multidisciplinary research. The title is Spaced. Sociology, politics, architecture, culture, economics, and data. Before it was space, but when we win that competition, they add this D to us, because another guy was, Alexei Novikov, was very experienced in this researching of real-time data. Here you can see the difference in these peripheries. And this is interesting. If you can compare the population density and public transport accessibility, you can see that only few of the cities like Paris are working well. Others completely not. And if we are talking about Moscow, we did this with mobility in chain. My friend Federico Paralotta, who based here, and honestly, I forgot to invite him for this lecture, but I need to mention that it's their job. This is the population density on the outskirts. This is the accessibility of public transport, and this is the result of the program until 2030, improving the public transport. And you can see that almost there are no changes for the periphery. There are, of course, but not a lot of. And here you can see the difference. And we did the poll, and some of the people inside DMKAT, which is the bigger ring in Moscow, they even doesn't feel like Moscovites. They feel that they are living somewhere. And we have southeast as the most problematic area. And here you can see what is, here is the Kremlin and the outskirts of Moscow. And here you can see that donut, the fourth one, the biggest one, that was researched by us, and we named this as Old Moscow. There is no river, there is no sea, Moscow sprawling everywhere. It's like an oil spot. We did an inventory of all of the waves of construction on that periphery. For Moscow, for some cities, there are sources with that data. For Moscow, it was the first time we did this, and you can see that most of the periphery was built in 70s and also 90s, which it was a surprise for me. Then we did inventory of all of the residential and typologies, and now we know where they are. This is important quote. You can read this in English. It was the quote of Nina Krajnia, one of the authors of Microrayon. And it was clear that for them it wasn't, it was the really new aesthetics. It wasn't like a work as engineer. It was a new aesthetics. And these equal comfortable houses was the idea of urban planning and construction. Equality was the main idea of that area, and it's still there. You can see that. Also accessibility. We did this research with students, and they check all of the accessible territories. We have different levels of accessibility. The darkest is most accessible. And we can say in the daytime, 73% of the territory is accessible. It's like a park already. Also, we find old features from urban planning existing in the city, and this is also a resource for highlighting that. And sometimes you can see old parks or old roads in the microrayons. Also, we find spontaneous centers. It was a quite complicated technology, and then we understand that new centers emerge in the periphery, and this research is about services. And we find that southeast of Moscow, this spot, as an example, on the southeast, is as dense as the center, but nobody knows why. Because it's like a surface, it's like a flat surface. Also, we find that nobody is visiting the center, and 20% never visiting the center at all in Moscow. It was also interesting data. Also, they did this research on data, and then understand that 40% of these transits through the center, but before they think that more than 40. It's only 40. This also was surprising, and finally we decided not to do any project because it was only 4 months of work. We decided to introduce the concept of super park, which is the idea is to leave everything like it is, not to touch this, because the idea is now to change microrayons for quartals. Nobody can do this in years, of course, and we need to find a new strategy for that. And this is an example, like public transport. Maybe it's evident, but not so well understood in Russia now, that you can leave buildings like they are, and maybe to work only with society, only with landscape, improving existing landscape. And finally, we did 2 books in Russian and in English. They are quite thick, and sorry. And also, it was a challenge for us. Also, we did a big exhibition, and this propaganda works very well, I would say. Right propaganda, helping you to sell your ideas to the city, and you can see that research. You can download this if you're interested. You can find articles about your cities there. The second example is another diploma work, 2003. We introduced the Green River concept for Moscow. This idea was to connect two huge forests, one on the north, another on the south, through industrial territories to be renovated. To do the little of corridor, green corridor, 20 kilometers of pedestrian corridor, and this is the composition. And here you can see two rivers. One is the Blue River, another is Green River, and the cross of these two rivers accidentally is the Zil, which we also win because of that concept. It helps us to win the competition, that we show that it's the cross of the new center. Maybe it was the speculation, but now we're doing the project. And this is that river. You can see that it's like a little bit of green everywhere, more green in the industrial. And this was the scheme for the Zil, the red dot on the southeast. The biggest one is the cross of these two rivers. And with that luggage, with that portfolio, we apply for the international competition for Moscow River last summer. And we worked together with Gillespie's, our friends from landscape architects from Scotland, Systematica from Milano, and other companies. And we were chosen in 6, and we delivered that concept, Moscow Future Ports, where city meets the river. The idea was that we take the picture broader after the big Moscow competition. We decided that it's important to see the Moscow River in the context of the river network. Then there was a concept of river link parks, because all of those areas are protected anyway, and but in the same time times abundant. Then this is the built substance of Moscow agglomeration. And here you can see the sports in Moscow, because the river is huge, of course, and you cannot do this even in 50 years, I think, in 30 years. And it was important to find really important points of intervention. And here they are. And what is the port for us? Port is exactly the place where city meets the river. It's the public space, of course. And we changed this for the Moscow landscape to make it clear for Moscow authorities. Sorry that some of those things are in Russian, they are doubled. Usually it is the park, or maybe sometimes connection is the boulevard. And finally, port is the destination on the river. Here is a quite complicated scheme. What is the port? Is the walking, connecting, parking, and arriving. Now it's we are developing this after the winning competition. We're developing the project together with the city. And we have such a places in Moscow where city meets the river. It's the Strelka Terrace, the bar, Strelka Bar. It's one of the nicest places in Moscow. Of course, it is in the center, but for the periphery, we have no such points. Also, we did another study for the accessibility, and also it's clear that Moscow River is completely non-accessible. It's even unseen in the city. You never can get there. With Systematica, we did the studies of public transport and bicycle. This is the new scheme. And finally, this is the small result of this is the concept. We have 11 city-scale ports, 28 district-scale ports for microrayons, and small decks, like numerous of decks along the river. This is the scheme, areas adjacent to that. And this is what we are doing now. Each of the ports are having a different structure from the same components. Black is the new development. It's not our idea, it's already happened. Gray is the old development, and red is the port itself, and of course green is the green. Pictures, and what's also important to say that of course we divided the center and periphery, introducing two structures. First is greening the center, and the second activating the periphery. Activating the periphery is about ports. Greening the center, no ports, only green islands in the granite channel. Here is the scheme for the river. Also, what's important to mention that we find 120 sources of water pollution, and we introduced it to the city. And this is a super important part, because the idea was to make the river clean, accessible, and active. First was clean, because river is unclean there, and this was the essential part. Here, major ports. The first is the Silver Lake. This is a protected area, and not a lot of interventions here. The second is Parliament Gardens, because they decided to move the parliament from the center to this peninsula, and here you can see the place for the new parliament complex, and we decided that it will be sort of new, one of the new centers, and huge public space needed on the river. The master plan. And we did a sketch for the parliament also, which is funny, but we want to make it transparent, because the existing concept is to make a castle from white marble. If you've been in Moscow, you can see such Soviet-style castles. We decided at least to make it something different. And then Moscow city is lacking parking, and the idea was to do the underground parking and cover this with orange and green public space, because it's really gray thing. And Zil Planet is what we are doing now, 3 channels: culture, innovation, and leisure. And this is what's on. And finally, the most abandoned place in Moscow. You can see that it's completely non-accessible. You cannot get there. There is an oil factory there, and the worst ecology and the cheapest flats there. Anyway, it's very close to one of the new spontaneous centers. And we decided to make there also public space, and city now is working on that project, because it's a sort of equality also to deliver something to the poorest area. And the last thing I want to show you is about greening the channel. It's quite simple. It's the architecture from green. It's the idea of our partner Brian Evans from Gillespie's. This is how it works. It's simple, and these islands are floating and cleaning the water in the channel everywhere. Kremlin developments. This is the center. Of course, we want to connect these islands with Zaryadye Park and to create this pedestrian route, and to maybe to do the wetland from the channel, because we're also having channel in Moscow. It's this one. It's not abandoned, but it's not for ships, and it's possible to do there the public space in the channel. And also, this is like a sort of dream what the river is, because it's not about using the river as a source for development or for selling, I don't know, expensive flats, views, or whatever. It's not about exploitation. It's about the river itself. That's why we think that these islands in front of the Kremlin, and also Wi-Fi and fish in the water, is the future of Moscow. It's maybe a little bit I don't know, utopian, looks like utopian, but now everybody discussing these islands, I think that this discussion is also productive. Thank you very much.